The storm raged across the countryside, its fury unmatched. Rain poured down in sheets and the wind howled like a wild animal. The trees bent under the pressure, their branches swaying violently as if trying to break free from their roots. Lightning split the sky into jagged pieces, illuminating the dark landscape for brief moments before plunging it back into shadow. It was the kind of night that made people stay indoors, huddled close to warmth and safety, but not everyone had that luxury. 14-year-old Emily Carter sat quietly in the passenger seat of her father's old pickup truck, clutching her backpack tightly against her chest. Her father, Tom, gripped the steering wheel with both hands, his knuckles white as he navigated the slippery roads. They were on their way home after visiting Emily's grandmother, who lived about an hour away. The visit had been pleasant enough. Emily loved listening to her grandma's stories about life when she was young. But now, the thought of being stuck in this storm made Emily uneasy. "Dad, do you think we should have waited out the rain?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wipers slapping furiously against the windshield. Tom glanced at her briefly before returning his focus to the road. "Nah, sweetheart. If we wait too long, the roads might get worse. Besides, your mom will start worrying if we don't get back soon." Emily nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. She stared out the window, watching the blurry shapes of trees and fields rush past. The headlights cut through the darkness, but even they couldn't penetrate the thick curtain of rain. Every few seconds, thunder boomed overhead, shaking the truck slightly. Despite her unease, Emily tried to distract herself by humming a tune under her breath. As they approached the old wooden bridge that crossed the river dividing their town from the neighboring one, something caught Emily's eye. At first, she thought it was just another trick of the lightning, a flash of light reflecting off the water, but then she saw it again. Headlights, submerged, faintly glowing beneath the surface of the swollen river. "Dad, stop," Emily shouted, pointing frantically toward the embankment. Tom slammed on the brakes and skidding slightly on the wet pavement before coming to a halt. Both of them stared in disbelief at the scene unfolding below. A car, half submerged in the rushing water, was slowly sinking deeper into the river. Its rear end was already underwater and the front was tilting dangerously downward. "Oh no," Tom muttered, his face pale. "Someone's still inside." Without thinking twice, Emily unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door. Cold rain hit her instantly, soaking her clothes and hair within seconds. The wind whipped around her, making it hard to stand upright. "Emily, what are you doing?" "Get back in the truck," Tom yelled, panic rising in his voice. "I can help," Emily shouted back, determination overriding her fear. "You won't make it down there fast enough." Before her father could argue further, she jumped out and started running toward the riverbank. Mud squelched beneath her sneakers and the icy water soaked her legs as she waded into the river. Each step felt heavier than the last, the current pulling at her ankles, but she pressed on. Her heart pounded in her ears, drowning out the storm around her. When she reached the car, she peered inside through the cracked driver's side window. A man sat slumped over the steering wheel, his cowboy hat askew on his head. His eyes were closed, and for a terrifying moment Emily thought he might already be gone. But then she saw his chest rise and fall weakly. "Hey, can you hear me?" she called out, tapping on the glass. When he didn't respond, she tried opening the door. It wouldn't budge. Panic bubbled up in her throat, but she forced herself to stay calm. She remembered seeing videos online about how to pry open car doors in emergencies. Bracing herself, she used all her strength to push against the door. Slowly, painfully, it began to give way. Finally, with a loud groan, the door swung open just wide enough for the man to slip through. Emily grabbed his arm and tugged with everything she had. He stirred slightly, mumbling something incoherent, but he didn't seem able to move on his own. Summoning courage she didn't know she possessed, Emily looped her arms around him and dragged him out of the car. Together they stumbled backward, fighting against the current until they reached the shore. By the time they collapsed onto solid ground, Emily was gasping for air, her body trembling from exhaustion and cold. The man lay beside her, coughing up water but otherwise alive. Tom arrived moments later, wrapping a blanket around Emily's shoulders and checking on the stranger. You did good, kiddo, Tom said, pride shining in his eyes despite the chaos. Real good. The man blinked up at them, his expression a mix of gratitude and confusion. Thank you, he rasped, his voice hoarse. I owe you my life. Emily smiled weakly, shivering uncontrollably. She didn't feel like a hero. In fact, she felt utterly drained. But deep down, she knew she'd done the right thing. And little did she know, this chance encounter would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone she cared about. The rain had finally stopped, but the air was still heavy with moisture. The riverbank glistened under the dim light of the moon, which peeked through gaps in the clouds. Tom helped the stranger to his feet while Emily stood nearby, clutching the blanket tightly around her shoulders. Her teeth chattered from the cold, but she couldn't take her eyes off the man they'd just rescued. He looked like someone out of a storybook, a cowboy with dusty boots, worn jeans, and a leather jacket that smelled faintly of tobacco and earth. His hat was slightly dented, and his face bore the rugged lines of someone who'd spent years outdoors. But there was something else about him, something guarded, almost mysterious. Are you hurt? Tom asked, scanning the man for injuries. We should get you checked out. The stranger shook his head, though he winced as he shifted his weight. I'm fine, he said, his voice rough but steady. Just banged up a bit. Thank you. Both of you. He glanced at Emily, his eyes softening. Especially you, miss, you saved my life. Emily blushed and looked away, feeling awkward under his gaze. It's no big deal, she mumbled. Anyone would have done the same. No, the man said firmly. Not everyone would have done what you did tonight. I owe you more than I can say. Tom cleared his throat, breaking the moment. Well, we're just glad you're okay. Do you need a ride somewhere? Or maybe we should call someone for you? For a second, the man hesitated. Then he shook his head again. No, thank you. I'll be all right. Just give me a minute to gather myself. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notepad and pen. Scribbling something quickly, he tore off the sheet and handed it to Emily. Here, if you ever need anything at all, you call this number, please. It's the least I can do. Emily took the piece of paper reluctantly, unsure what to make of it. The ink smudged slightly from the dampness, but the numbers were legible enough. She nodded, stuffing it into her pocket without another thought. With some effort, the man limped, back toward the road where Tom's truck waited. Emily watched him go, her curiosity piqued. There was something strange about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. He didn't act like someone who'd been stranded in the middle of nowhere by accident. And why had he refused their offer of help so politely yet firmly? The next morning, Emily woke up to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. For a moment, she forgot everything that had happened the night before. But then she noticed her clothes piled in a soggy heap on the floor, and the memory came rushing back. She got dressed quickly and headed downstairs where her mother, Sarah, was busy making breakfast. Morning, sweetheart, Sarah said cheerfully. Your dad told me what happened last night. That was incredibly brave of you. Emily shrugged, sliding into a chair at the kitchen table. I don't know about brave, I just reacted, I guess. Well, I'm proud of you, Sarah said, placing a plate of pancakes in front of her. And your father mentioned the man gave you his number. What did he look like? Emily frowned, trying to recall the details. He was kind of mysterious, I guess, like a cowboy or something. He didn't really talk much about himself. Sarah raised an eyebrow. A cowboy? Around here? That's unusual. Before Emily could respond, her younger brother, Jake, burst into the room, holding a piece of paper triumphantly above his head. Look what I found, he announced. Emily groaned when she saw the crumpled note in his hand, the one the stranger had given her. Jake, give that back. Reluctantly, Jake handed it over, snickering. Who's Jack? He teased. Emily snatched the note and smoothed it out on the table. Sure enough, the name Jack was written at the top, followed by a phone number. She hadn't paid much attention to it the night before, but now she felt a flicker of curiosity. Who exactly was this man, and why had he seemed so insistent that she keep his number? At school later that day, Emily became the center of attention. News of her heroic deed had spread quickly, thanks to her father mentioning it to a few neighbors. By lunchtime, everyone knew about the girl who'd saved a stranger from drowning in the river. Some kids treated her like a celebrity, asking endless questions about how it felt to be a hero. Others were skeptical, whispering behind her back about whether she'd exaggerated the story. "I heard the guy was drunk," one boy sneered during recess. "Probably drove himself off the road." "He wasn't drunk," Emily snapped, her cheeks flushing. "He was just unlucky, I guess." Her best friend Mia came to her defense. "Leave her alone," she said, glaring at the boy. "She doesn't have to prove anything to you." Emily appreciated Mia's support, but the constant attention made her uncomfortable. She didn't want to be seen as some kind of superhero. All she'd done was follow her instincts. Still, she couldn't deny that the experience had left her feeling different somehow, as if she'd crossed an invisible line between childhood and adulthood. That evening after dinner, Emily sat on the porch swing, staring at the horizon. The storm had washed away most traces of its fury, leaving behind a calm, almost eerie silence. She pulled the crumpled note from her pocket and stared at it again. Something about Jack's insistence that she call him nagged at her. Maybe he really was grateful, or maybe there was more to his story than he'd let on. Curiosity got the better of her. Taking a deep breath, she went inside and picked up the house phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed the number. Each ring felt like an eternity. Just as she was about to hang up, a voice answered. "Hello?" It was Jack. His tone was warm and familiar, as if he'd been expecting her call. Hi," Emily stammered. "This is Emily from last night. I just wanted to check if you were okay." There was a pause on the other end, and then Jack chuckled softly. "Emily, I was wondering when you'd call." "Yes, I'm fine, thanks to you. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," she said, surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. I wanted to make sure you were all right." "That means a lot," Jack replied sincerely. "Listen, I'd love to meet your family properly, to thank them in person. Would tomorrow afternoon work?" Emily hesitated. Meeting Jack again felt like stepping into unknown territory, but something about his voice reassured her. "Sure," she said finally. "I'll ask my parents." "Great. Until then, take care of yourself, Emily. And thank you again." As she hung up the phone, Emily realized that her encounter with Jack was far from over. Little did she know this simple conversation would set into motion a series of events that would change her life, and her entire community, forever. The next afternoon, Emily's family gathered in the living room, bracing themselves for Jack's visit. Tom paced nervously near the window, glancing outside every few seconds. Sarah straightened cushions on the couch and adjusted the curtains, her hands fidgeting with the fabric. Jake, who rarely sat still for more than a minute, was unusually quiet, perched on the edge of his seat like he was waiting for something exciting to happen. Emily, meanwhile, stood by the door, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She wasn't sure what to expect. The man she'd saved had sounded friendly enough on the phone, but there was still an air of mystery about him that made her uneasy. When a car finally pulled into their driveway, everyone froze. It wasn't just any car. It was a sleek black sedan, polished to perfection, its tires gleaming even in the dull light of the cloudy afternoon. The contrast between the vehicle and their modest farmhouse was stark. For a moment, no one moved. Then the driver's door opened and Jack stepped out. He looked different today. Gone were the muddy boots and soaked jacket from the night of the accident. Instead, he wore a tailored navy blue suit that fit him perfectly, paired with a crisp white shirt and a neatly knotted tie. His cowboy hat had been replaced by a pair of aviator sunglasses, which he removed as he approached the house. Despite the change in appearance, his demeanor remained warm and approachable. He smiled as he climbed the porch steps, carrying a large bouquet of flowers in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. "Good afternoon," Jack said, his voice smooth and confident. "I hope I'm not intruding." Tom opened the door wider, clearing his throat. "Not at all. Come on in, Mr. Jack." "Just Jack is fine," he replied, stepping inside. He handed the flowers to Sarah, who accepted them with a surprised expression. "These are for you, ma'am. And this," he held up the gift bag, "is for Emily." Emily took the bag hesitantly, peeking inside to find a beautifully wrapped box. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly, feeling a mix of gratitude and awkwardness. "I wanted to," Jack said simply. "It's the least I can do, after everything." Once everyone settled into the living room, Jack began sharing bits and pieces of his story. He explained that he'd been traveling through the area, exploring small towns and countryside roads, when his car skidded off the bridge during the storm. What he didn't mention was why he'd chosen such a remote route or where he'd been heading. His answers were polite but vague, leaving plenty of room for speculation. Despite his evasiveness, Jack's charm quickly won over the Carters. He complimented Sarah's homemade apple pie, asked thoughtful questions about Tom's work as a mechanic, and even managed to coax a laugh out of Jake by teasingly comparing him to a young adventurer. But it was Emily who caught his attention, most often. Every time their eyes met, she felt a strange sense of recognition, as though they shared some unspoken connection. After dessert, Jack excused himself briefly to make a phone call. While he was outside, Tom leaned toward Sarah and whispered, "There's something about him, isn't there? He doesn't seem like your average guy." Sarah nodded, her brow furrowed. "I agree. But whatever his secrets are, he's certainly grateful to us. And polite, too." When Jack returned, he carried an envelope in his hand. "Before I leave," he said, addressing the entire family, "I want to express my thanks in a way that feels meaningful. This is for you, a token of my appreciation." He handed the envelope to Tom, who opened it cautiously. Inside were several crisp $100 bills neatly stacked. Tom's jaw dropped. "Jack, this is incredible, but we can't accept this." "Yes, you can," Jack insisted. "Consider it a contribution to your community. Fix up the barn, repair the roof, do whatever you need. I owe you far more than money could ever repay." Sarah tried to protest as well, but Jack wouldn't hear it. "Please," he said gently, "let me do this. It's important to me." Reluctantly, Tom agreed. Later that evening, after Jack had driven away, the family sat around the kitchen table staring at the envelope. The amount was staggering. Not life-changing, perhaps, but enough to ease some of the financial burdens they'd been carrying for years. Emily couldn't stop, thinking about how effortlessly Jack had handed over the cash as if it were nothing. Whoever he was, he clearly had resources beyond anything they'd imagined. Over the following days, whispers spread throughout the town about Jack's generosity. Neighbors stopped by the Carter household to ask about the mysterious stranger, who'd shown up in a luxury car and left behind an envelope full of cash. Some people were skeptical, wondering if there was a catch. Others saw it as a sign of hope, a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. For Emily, however, the encounter left her with more questions than answers. She found herself replaying their interactions in her mind, trying to piece together clues about Jack's true identity. Why had he been driving alone on that dark road? Why did he dress like a cowboy one day and a businessman the next? And most importantly, why had he chosen her family to help? Her curiosity deepened when she noticed subtle changes in Jack's behavior during his visit. Beneath his polished exterior, there was a sadness in his eyes, a quiet longing that hinted at a deeper story. Emily wondered if he'd experienced some kind of loss or hardship that drove him to seek solace in unfamiliar places. Whatever it was, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jack's actions weren't just about gratitude, they were about redemption. One evening, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Emily decided to dig a little deeper. Using the name Jack had given her, she searched online for information. At first, she found nothing unusual. But then, late into the night, she stumbled across an article featuring a photo that made her heart skip a beat. The man in the picture bore a striking resemblance to the person she'd rescued. According to the headline, he was a billionaire entrepreneur named Jack Monroe, known for revitalizing struggling communities across the country. The article described him as a modern-day Robin Hood, using his wealth to breathe new life into forgotten towns. Emily stared at the screen, her mind racing. Jack Monroe wasn't just a wealthy man, he was a legend. And somehow, without realizing it, she'd saved his life. The realization filled her with awe and a touch of fear. If Jack truly was as powerful and influential as the article claimed, then his presence in their lives could mean much more than anyone anticipated. As sleep finally overtook her, Emily couldn't help but wonder, what would Jack do next? And how would it affect her family and her town? The days following Jack's visit passed in a blur for Emily and her family. The envelope of cash sat on the kitchen counter, untouched but heavy with meaning. Tom and Sarah debated how best to use it, whether to fix the leaky roof, replace the old tractor, or finally repaint the barn that had been peeling for years. Jake kept asking if they could buy a new video game console, which earned him stern looks from his parents. But Emily couldn't focus on any of those discussions. Her mind kept circling back to what she'd discovered online. Jack Monroe wasn't just a mysterious stranger. He was a billionaire philanthropist whose name carried weight far beyond their small town. At first, Emily didn't tell anyone about her late-night research. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it felt too surreal to put into words, or maybe she wanted to protect the quiet simplicity of her family's life before Jack entered it. Whatever the reason, she kept the information to herself, replaying the articles, details over and over in her head. Jack Monroe had made headlines not just for his wealth but for his unconventional approach to helping others. Instead of simply writing checks, he embedded himself in communities, learning their stories and finding creative ways to make lasting change. He'd rebuilt schools, funded local businesses, and even turned abandoned buildings into thriving centers of activity. And now somehow he'd chosen their town and her family to be part of his mission. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emily found herself sitting on the porch swing again. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass. She held her phone in her lap, scrolling through more articles about Jack. Each one painted him as a visionary leader, yet they also hinted at a man burdened by his own success. One journalist described him as haunted, a word that struck Emily deeply. Haunted by what? Regret? Loss? Something else entirely? Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Looking up, she saw Jack's sleek, black sedan pulling into the driveway once more. Her stomach flipped nervously. What was he doing here so soon? Jack stepped out of the car, dressed casually this time in jeans and a dark sweater. His cowboy boots were back, polished to a shine. He smiled warmly as he approached the porch. "Evening, Emily," he said, tipping an imaginary hat. "Mind if I join you?" Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure." He settled onto the swing beside her, letting it sway gently. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, almost companionable. Finally, Jack broke it. "I've been thinking a lot about your town," he began, his voice thoughtful. "It has character, heart, the kind of place people write songs and poems about, but I can see it's struggling too." Emily glanced at him, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "Yeah, I guess it is," she admitted. "A lot of folks have moved away looking for jobs. It's hard to keep things going around here sometimes." Jack nodded, his expression somber. "That's why I want to help. Not because I feel obligated, but because places like this matter. They remind us where we come from, who we are." Emily studied him closely, searching for signs of insincerity. But all she saw was genuine emotion. "Why do you care so much?" she asked softly. You're Jack Monroe. You could live anywhere, do anything. Why bother with a tiny town like ours?" Jack chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "That's a fair question." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "When you grow up poor like I did, you never forget what it feels like to need help, and to rarely get it. My parents worked themselves to the bone just to keep food on the table. We lived in a trailer park outside a town not so different from yours. Every day was a struggle, but even then there was beauty in the simplicity of it. People looked out for each other. Neighbors shared what little they had. That sense of community, it shaped me. Emily listened intently, captivated by his words. This was the first time Jack had opened up about his past, and it gave her a glimpse into the man behind the polished exterior. But then, Jack continued, his voice growing quieter. Success changes you. Suddenly, you're surrounded by people who want something from you. Deals, favors, attention. You lose sight of what really matters. And somewhere along the way, I forgot how to connect with people the way I used to, until... He paused, glancing at Emily. Until someone reminded me. Emily blinked, startled. Me? Jack smiled faintly. Yes, you. When I saw you wading into that river, risking your life for a complete stranger, you reminded me of everything I'd lost touch with: courage, selflessness, humanity. It hit me harder than I expected. His admission left Emily speechless. She hadn't thought of herself as courageous or selfless. To her, jumping into the river had been instinctive, a split-second decision driven by adrenaline. But hearing Jack describe it that way made her see it differently. Maybe she had done something extraordinary. Or maybe she realized everyone has the potential to be extraordinary given the right circumstances. So, Jack said, clapping his hands together lightly. Here's my plan. I want to invest in your town. Start small. Fix up the diner that burned down last year. Turn it into a hub where people can gather, eat good food, share stories. From there, we'll see what else needs doing. Does that sound okay? Emily stared at him, her heart swelling with hope. The idea of reviving the diner, the same one where she'd celebrated birthdays and holidays as a child, felt like a dream come true. But she couldn't help wondering if Jack's generosity came with strings attached. Was he truly doing this out of kindness, or was there something more personal driving him? Why are you really doing this? She asked bluntly, surprising, even herself. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. Honestly, because I don't know how else to heal myself. Helping others helps me remember who I am or who I used to be. Maybe it sounds selfish, but it's the truth. For the first time, Emily saw the cracks in Jack's armor. Beneath the confident billionaire was a man wrestling with guilt and regret, searching for redemption. And in that moment, she understood that saving him hadn't just been about pulling him from the river. It had been about giving him a second chance to find purpose. You're not selfish, she said quietly. You're human. Jack looked at her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Then he smiled, a real, heartfelt smile, and patted her shoulder. Thank you, Emily, for everything. As they sat there together, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, Emily felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. Jack Monroe had changed her life, and her town, forever. Word of Jack Monroe's plan spread like wildfire through the small town. At first, people were skeptical. After all, promises of change had been made before, only to fizzle out when reality hit. But as construction began on the old diner site, skepticism gave way to excitement. Bulldozers rumbled down Main Street. Workers in bright orange vests hammered away at charred beams, and soon enough, the skeletal remains of the burned-down building transformed into something new and hopeful. The townsfolk gathered daily to watch the progress, their faces lighting up with each passing day. For many, it felt like a miracle, a second chance for a community that had long felt forgotten. Emily found herself drawn to the scene almost every afternoon after school. She'd sit on a bench nearby, watching as the structure took shape. Sometimes Jack would join her, offering updates or answering questions from curious onlookers. He was always polite, always patient, but Emily noticed subtle changes in him over time. While he smiled often and spoke warmly, there were moments when his gaze drifted off into the distance, as if he were searching for something, or someone, he couldn't quite find. It was during these quiet pauses that Emily realized how lonely Jack seemed, despite being surrounded by people who admired him. One evening, As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the construction site, Emily approached Jack. He stood near the foundation of the diner, hands shoved into his pockets, staring at the half-finished walls. "Hey," she said softly, stepping beside him. "You okay?" Jack blinked, pulling himself back to the present. "Yeah," he replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just thinking." "About what?" Emily asked, tilting her head curiously. He hesitated, then gestured toward the rising structure. "This place reminds me of my childhood. My mom worked as a waitress in a diner like this one. I used to sit in a booth doing homework while she served customers. Back then, it felt like the center of the world, the kind of place where everyone knew your name." Emily nodded, imagining the bustling energy of such a place. "Do you miss it?" Jack shrugged, his shoulders heavy with memory, some days more than others. Life moves fast when you're trying to build an empire. You don't realize how much you've left behind until it's too late. His words lingered between them, filling the space with a quiet understanding. Emily wanted to ask more, to pry open the vault of emotions he seemed determined to keep locked. But she knew better than to push. Instead, she changed the subject. "The diner's going to be amazing. People are already talking about what they'll order first once it opens." That brought a faint smile to Jack's lips. "Good. That's exactly what I want, to give people a reason to come together again. Food has a way of doing that, doesn't it? Bringing people closer." "It does," Emily agreed. "And not just food. You're giving us hope too. A lot. Folks thought nothing good would ever happen here again, but now—" She trailed off, gesturing toward the activity around them. Jack looked at her, his eyes softening. "Hope is powerful, isn't it? Funny thing is, I think I needed this as much as anyone else, maybe even more." Before Emily could respond, a group of kids ran past, laughing and chasing each other around the construction barriers. Their joy was infectious, and for a moment both Jack and Emily forgot their serious conversation. They watched the children play, their laughter echoing through the air like music. It was a reminder that life wasn't just about pain or regret. It was also about moments like this, fleeting yet beautiful. As weeks turned into months, the diner neared completion. Painters added fresh coats of color to the exterior. Neon signs buzzed to life above the entrance, and the smell of freshly baked bread wafted through the streets as chefs tested recipes inside. The entire town buzzed with anticipation. Flyers announcing the grand opening were plastered on bulletin boards, lampposts, and shop windows. Even the local newspaper dedicated a front-page article to the event, dubbing it "A New Chapter for Our Beloved Town." On the morning of the big day, Emily woke up early, unable to contain her excitement. She dressed carefully, choosing her favorite sweater and brushing her hair until it shone. When she arrived at the diner, the line stretched down the block, filled with eager townsfolk clutching menus and chatting animatedly. Balloons bobbed in the breeze, and a band played cheerful tunes on a makeshift stage nearby. It was a celebration unlike anything the town had seen in years. Jack stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they entered. He looked dapper in a tailored suit, though he'd swapped his dress shoes for cowboy boots, a nod to his roots perhaps. When he spotted Emily, he waved her over. "You look great," he said, smiling. "Ready for the big reveal?" "I've been ready for months," she replied, grinning back. Inside, the diner was breathtaking. Warm wood paneling lined the walls, vintage posters adorned the spaces between booths, and a jukebox sat proudly in the corner, ready to belt out classic tunes. The counter gleamed under the soft glow of pendant lights, and the smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. It was everything Emily remembered, and more. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, Jack stepped onto the stage to address the crowd. Microphone in hand, he cleared his throat and scanned the sea of faces before him. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice steady but heartfelt. "This diner represents more than just food. It's a symbol of resilience, of community, of hope. And none of this would have been possible without the bravery of one young woman who inspired me to believe in second chances." The crowd turned to look at Emily, who blushed furiously as Jack gestured for her to join him on stage. Reluctantly, she climbed the steps, feeling every eye on her. Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Emily Carter risked her life. To save mine, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. But she gave me something even greater, a reminder of what truly matters. So today, I'm proud to announce the creation of the Emily Carter Scholarship Fund, a program designed to help kids in this town pursue their dreams, whatever they may be. Gasps rippled through the audience as cheers erupted. Emily stared at Jack, tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't expected this, hadn't imagined her simple act of kindness would lead to something so monumental. As the applause washed over her, she realized that sometimes heroes aren't defined by grand gestures or titles. They're ordinary people who choose to make extraordinary decisions. Later that evening, as the festivities wound down and the last of the guests departed, Emily found Jack sitting alone at a booth near the window. He looked tired, but content, sipping a cup of coffee as he gazed out at the stars. Sliding into the seat across from him, she smiled. "You did it," she said simply. "We did it," he corrected, raising his mug in a silent toast. "And maybe, just maybe, we'll keep doing it for as long as it takes." The weeks following the diner's grand opening were a whirlwind of activity. The once quiet town buzzed with renewed energy, as if Jack Monroe's investment had awakened something dormant within its people. Customers streamed into the diner daily, filling booths and lining up at the counter for hearty meals and warm conversation. Locals who hadn't spoken in years reconnected over plates of pancakes and cups of coffee. Tourists passing through began stopping by, drawn by word-of-mouth stories about the little town that came back to life. It was more than just a business. It was a beacon of hope. For Emily, life felt like it had shifted onto a new track. Her name was everywhere now, on banners outside the diner, in articles praising the scholarship fund, and even in casual conversations among neighbors. At first, she struggled with the attention, feeling unworthy of being called a hero. But as time went on, she realized that her role wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about connection. People saw her as someone who'd made a difference, and that inspired them to believe they could too. Slowly, she embraced the idea that maybe, just maybe, one person really could change the world around them. Jack, meanwhile, became a fixture in the community. He rented a small house on the outskirts of town and spent most of his days overseeing projects or chatting with locals. His presence was comforting but still tinged with mystery. There were moments when he seemed completely at ease, laughing with children during story time at the library, helping farmers repair fences, or joining impromptu jam sessions at the diner. But other times, he retreated into himself, disappearing for hours without explanation. Emily noticed these shifts in him acutely, sensing that beneath his outward success he carried burdens he couldn't fully share. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emily decided to confront him. She found him sitting alone on the porch of his rental home, staring out at the golden fields stretching toward the horizon. A notebook rested on his lap, its pages filled with scribbled notes and sketches. When she approached, he looked up, startled but pleased to see her. "Hey," she said, settling into a chair beside him. "Mind if I join you?" "Of course not," Jack replied, closing the notebook and setting it aside. "What brings you here?" Emily hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking about everything you've done for this town, and for me. It's amazing, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I wonder, is it enough? For you, I mean." Jack's expression softened, though a flicker of sadness crossed his face. "That's a good question. One I ask myself a lot, actually. Do you ever feel like you're running from something?" Emily pressed gently. "Like no matter how much you help others, it doesn't quite fill the hole inside?" Jack chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "You're sharper than you let on, aren't you?" He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Yeah, I guess I am running. From guilt, mostly. From mistakes I can't undo. I thought throwing money at problems would fix things, but it doesn't. Not really. What I'm learning now, at least I think I'm learning, is that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about finding meaning in the present. Emily nodded, absorbing his words. So what does that mean for you? Are you going to stay here forever? Jack smiled faintly. Forever might be a stretch, but I'll stick around for a while longer. This place, it feels like home in a way I haven't felt in years. Maybe because it reminds me of where I came from, or maybe because of people like you. His answer surprised her, not because of what he said, but because of how sincere he sounded. For all his wealth and influence, Jack Monroe was just a man, searching for peace, trying to piece together a life fractured by loss and regret. And in helping others, he was beginning to find it. As winter approached, the town prepared for its annual holiday festival. Lights twinkled along Main Street, wreaths adorned shop doors, and carolers sang cheerful tunes under the glow of street lamps. The diner became the heart of the celebration, hosting a charity dinner for families in need and offering free hot cocoa to anyone who stopped by. Jack played Santa Claus for the evening, handing out gifts to wide-eyed children while Emily helped serve food alongside her parents and friends. It was a night filled with laughter, warmth, and gratitude, a testament to how far the community had come. At the end of the evening, as the crowd thinned and the last decorations were packed away, Emily stood with Jack near the diner's entrance. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, dusting the ground with a fresh layer of white. They both gazed out at the quiet town, bathed in the soft glow of Christmas lights. You know, Jack said after a long pause, when I drove off that road that night, I didn't expect to survive, let alone find whatever this is. He gestured vaguely at the scene around them. A second chance, a purpose. You saved me, Emily, in more ways than one. Emily shook her head, smiling shyly. I just followed my gut. Anyone would have done the same. Maybe, Jack admitted. But not everyone has your courage or your heart. Don't underestimate the power of what you've done. You've changed lives, including mine. Tears pricked at the corners of Emily's eyes, but she blinked them away, refusing to cry. Instead, she reached out and gave Jack a quick hug. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Jack hugged her back, holding on for just a moment, longer than necessary. When they pulled apart, he looked at her with a smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. No, Emily. Thank you. In the months that followed, Jack continued to invest in the town, funding new initiatives and supporting local entrepreneurs. The scholarship fund bore fruit almost immediately, sending several students to college who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford it. Emily herself dreamed of applying someday, perhaps to study journalism or photography. But more importantly, she carried with her the lessons she'd learned from Jack, that kindness leaves ripples, bravery inspires others, and redemption is always possible no matter how lost you feel. As for Jack, he remained a part of the community, though he eventually returned to his work elsewhere, dividing his time between the town and his various ventures. Yet whenever he came back, he was greeted with open arms, not as a billionaire savior, but as a friend. He wasn't perfect. He still wrestled with his demons, but he was healing step by step, and so the little town thrived, its spirit stronger than ever. Through storms and struggles, it had found a way to rise again, thanks to the unlikely bond between a young girl and the cowboy turned millionaire, whose lives intertwined in ways neither could have predicted. Together, they proved that sometimes, the smallest acts of courage can spark the greatest transformations.